So we have two technologies here, fixed wireless broadband. Let's first focus on the point to multi-point aspect of that, where one access point connects up multiple client devices, and then we'll talk about Wi-Fi mesh. So obviously these two technologies exist, and they have a reason to exist. There's a logical reason for each of these technologies to exist. So when you guys get a network request, somebody says, you know what, we have this project, we want to do this. What's your first thoughts in your mind, how you evaluate whether you want to use fixed wireless broadband, so that may be a point to multi-point link, mixture with some other types of links, or you use Wi-Fi mesh, or God forbid, even maybe use fiber?
You know,
I shouldn't say that, but go ahead, Drew.
No, when I get these requests, what I look at is I always like to think about surgeon, different types of scalpels, right? And when you go in and you need something, rarely ever is there one single fit, right? There's not one piece of equipment that can do everything that's being requested. So I like to look at the whole scope of what that request is from the customer and really determine what the best type of technology is that can service that request overall. Like I deal with a lot of cities and municipalities, and in those, sometimes the best connection, if you're doing a downtown area, is to do some really high speed point to multi-point. Whereas if you're doing neighborhoods, maybe mesh works to get into the neighborhoods, or maybe it's a combination of the two, where you use high speed to feed into the mesh, or you have point to multi-point coming down from a water tower to blanket over an entire area. And then that connects in the high speed stuff underneath the canopy, and maybe there's some mesh that goes into it. But I don't really think that there's one answer for all of them. It's all dependent upon the total objective of what your customer is trying to do. And I think that a lot of times wireless, folks tend to get pigeonholed into thinking that one is better than the other. And I think that a good combination of all of them, including fiber, the dirty word in the wireless industry, including fiber, is something that really helps. It's about leveraging what you have and using it to the best of its ability. And I think that that's something that gets lost a lot. Wi-Fi isn't really good for everything. The IoT stuff, the 900 megahertz stuff isn't really good for everything, but they all serve their purposes to create that entire solution for a customer. And I think we need to keep focused on that.
That's why we call it a network. That's where the name, the internet, came from, right? The fact that there is no single technology. So Gino, what are you looking at in this type of question when you first want to evaluate these technologies? Gino, what sort of factors do you think in your line of work really is important to look at?
Yes, as a fixed wireless access provider, it's mainly defined by the area that we want to cover with services and what kind of speeds you want to offer. We deal more with fixed wireless technology, multi-point, whereas in a certain area you want to offer some sort of speeds that are kind of in the range of 100 megs. You want to provide 1 gig of service, so there's several technologies that you can use and you can leverage to provide the service that you're looking for. So as Drew said, you have different scaples to go into surgery, or different tools on your toolbox. So for example, if you want to provide services near 1 gigabit per second in the multi-point environment, you have certain tools like the cnWave. That's a new technology from Cambium, 60 gigahertz, which utilize a mix, let's say, of mesh technology with fixed wireless access. And then you can go and deploy that in a really dense area. Whereas if you need to provide services in a scarcely populated area or a rural area, you have to go with a tool like fixed wireless, traditional fixed wireless tools. So, but for example, if you have a customer that is asking for a temporary service or a special event service in an event, then you have to go with the Wi-Fi system, because it's easier and faster to deploy. It's going to be used for a while, a couple of days, and the end users will be using for the most of the time cell phones or tablets to access the internet. So in that case, Wi-Fi mesh makes the whole sense. Whereas fixed wireless doesn't fit that model. So it's a real evaluation of what you want to achieve, what speeds you want to achieve, what's density of the area, and the size of the area.
And then to piggyback off of what Gino was saying, I think when you look at the environment, first of all, the big questions that come to mind are, well, is there a need for high speed, or will low speed suffice? Is there line of sight? Is there non-line of sight? Are there obstructions? Are there no obstructions? And then most importantly, Gino, what you pointed out, I think is super important to always remember is, what is the client device going to be?
Mhm.
Is it going to be someone using Wi-Fi at the end of the pipe, or is it something where you're going to be connecting something via Ethernet? So
Right.
I really think the combination of understanding that environment, the physical environment, along with the needs and what that end user device is, I think those are really important parts. I'm glad you brought those up.
Yeah, I like that as well. As you guys are talking, I'm thinking about the process, Gino, that's required to deploy that network, to architect the network, pull in all that data, collect all that data, then make a
Mhm.
decision, and then do that deployment. And so your deployment time actually becomes also one of those factors, doesn't it?
Right, definitely. It's actually is one of the most important factors. In the business of fixed wireless and the WISP business, you have a market that you need to provide services, and since it's a pretty competitive business, if you don't provide the service quickly enough, then another competitor might come in and snoop up all the customers. So it's very time sensitive
That's
equation.
right. Your competitors aren't sitting resting.
And
Exactly.
one thing I would add to that, Gino, unfortunately, you and I both live along, you live in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, and I live right on the edge of the Gulf of Mexico. And one of the things that we know all too well is emergency response, emergency disaster
Hmm.
aid, network resilience, things like that,
Exactly.
that a lot of times speed isn't the issue just from a competitive perspective. But when we have infrastructure that fails, or infrastructure that goes down, or infrastructure that's underneath water, or doesn't work because there's not electricity, a lot of times wireless tends to be a solution. I want to give you kudos to everything that you've done there in Puerto Rico over the last couple of years. I mean, the whole wireless industry's watched what you've done over there, and it's fantastic. But
Thank you.
being
Appreciate it.
able to quickly respond in an emergency isn't just reserved for people like us on the Gulf
Hmm.
Coast, or in the Gulf. Everywhere you're looking, whether any type of natural disaster can knock out so much infrastructure so
Hmm.
quickly. And usually, the number one way to get that infrastructure back online is a very quick wireless link. So speed to market, or speed to
Exactly.
availability for this is, I think it's essential when it comes to what we're doing. And like I say to a lot of my customers, they always ask the fiber question.
Mhm.
Well, why shouldn't I just build out fiber? And I say, you know what? Build out wireless now. Solve your problem now. Get it done today. Get a solution in front of whoever you're trying to get that solution in front of. And when you have the time and the budget to bring that fiber in, now you have a wireless backup. Now you have a
Right.
resilient network. Now you have a redundant network, so you can serve both purposes with that.
That's nice. I appreciate you guys talking about the emergency response teams, and that's actually something that we have seen in Puerto Rico, other places of the world. A big need in terms of natural disasters, but even the pandemic, this COVID-19
Mm.
was a disaster, an event that we certainly did not expect, and no one could have planned for that to the degree that we needed to, and so this need for these emergency response networks actually occurred and is occurring now in many parts of the
Hmm.
world in terms of getting access to data, putting in remote clinics, medical clinics in remote rural facilities, and they need access to data. They need access to hard data. They need to do reporting, access to test results. You have to set up a network. Has to be stood up, and it has to be stood up quickly in a day or two. You have to have that network up and running. And so, this concept of these emergency response networks um, is something that we need to explore more, and we
And
need
I
to.
think, Darren, one of the projects that we just came off of that we got a lot of, great spotlight on was dealing with the response to the pandemic, not just from the emergency disaster perspective, but the disaster that's happening in our schools and our cities and our disconnected nation. And so, like when we got approached here by the city of McAllen, and we stood up 1,000 nodes, 1,000 access points, 1,000 CBRS endpoints, 24 base stations in less than 60 days. It was one of those things that gave us the opportunity to get into our community quickly, get our students back online so that they could, continue their education, get our workforce back online, get our stores and shops online so that
Hmm.
they didn't lose some of that sales tax. It was that side of the emergency where we've seen so much growth also. So it's been really neat to see how these networks have been repurposed to connect the disconnected, at the same time solving those emergency issues.
Go try that with fiber.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, I tell you, you guys are really really hitting on some points that all of us can relate to. And before this podcast, Drew and I were talking about our kids and their impact, and certainly that educational impact in the past year has been huge, and it is a national emergency.